I am so excited to welcome my next guest. Mr. Todd Carpenter is here. Not only is he a thought leader in the real estate realm, I have known him for decades, and he worked for quite some time for the National Association of Realtors. The word NAR, National Association of Realtors, is everywhere right now. But the reality is I feel like very few consumers actually, and maybe a few real estate agents too, but actually know who NAR is, what they stand for, what they do. Can you give us a little bit of kind of that background, that history?
Sure. So there have been, people representing buyers and sellers in America since there was America. Real estate agents were encouraged because they're competing with each other, but they're also cooperating with each other, and they were encouraged to get along. And so they started creating. And honestly, they were more like good old boys groups in the very beginning. They were a bunch of old white men. They would gather like in a tavern or a restaurant once a week or once a month. And one of them is saying, hey, I'm selling Old Man Johnson's farm. And two other people will say, well, I know someone interested in that farm. And that's how they would understand.
And they bring their bag of money
but very quickly, the more important part that no one really thinks about is that they've created these rules that they all played by on their own, not government rules, but rules where, hey, if you break these rules, you're going to get kicked out of the club. So you all have to treat each other with professionalism. And these rules eventually got written down. And
is this where we insert our code of ethics?
Sure, the code of ethics, but also it got so complicated as to, today, when you put in a listing, there's like a amount of time between when you have a listing contract and when it has to be displayed to everybody else on the MLS. There's lots of different rules that are all trying to create a fair marketplace. And that marketplace is taken for granted greatly because what it means is that people, everyday consumers have access to almost all the homes that are ever for sale. When someone lists their home, they can list it all over the internet, and they can get maximum exposure for it or not, depending on the deal they're trying to do. But they have that flexibility, all because of this set of rules. And then the states started to organize all the local boards, and then actually NAR, the national, came last. So
is it an evolution to that almost?
Sure, and so these are all separate entities. So here in Chicago, there's a Chicago Association of Realtors. Out in the suburbs where I live, there's a Main Street Organization of Realtors, and they all are local organizations that tend to work together, and then they work together at the state level and then at the national level.
And I think you bring up so many great points there. I think a lot of people don't realize, how much red tape there really is in the way to really benefit the consumer, right? To keep it fair. We always know every industry has people that are going to try and manipulate the systems, maybe not have the best of intentions. But NAR has set forth all these guidelines for us to try and make the atmosphere that we work in as fair as possible for agents to agents, as well as the consumer at the end of the day. It holds us as agents accountable, making sure that we're practicing in the correct way, a fair way, and also holding us to our code of ethics. As I said before, those are the things that we need to do to make sure that we're representing our clients in the absolute best interest.
For sure.
That's fantastic. Now, here's kind of starting to get a little bit of a dicey question, I know. Are all people that practice real estate members of NAR?
No, and I believe there are around 2 million people who are licensed to sell real estate in the United States. About 1.5 million are NAR members. Out of that 1.5 million, there's probably 200,000 that are actually actively selling real estate every day and doing a good job. There's a lot of real estate agents. And I count my mom as one of these who still has a real estate license, doesn't practice real estate. And so, but the active number of agents that really do a lot of business is probably around 200,000 for the United States. And they're almost all realtors.
We talk a lot about that in our day and age, is that, we study the Chicagoland market, and the amount of agents that are actually doing the business is a small fraction of the amount of licensed agents at the end of the day.
For sure.
Okay, so here's another, I know, a little bit of a hot topic that we've heard. As these changes start to go into place, are agents still going to be recommended and or required, based on what you think, to belong to the National Association of Realtors?
I think if you ask brokers, they see the value in both the MLS and the boards that run the MLSs and the National Association. They understand the long game of, for instance, if you're a consumer and you have a mortgage, you can deduct the taxes, your mortgage payment interest on your taxes. That's because of NAR. And it's only still in place because of NAR. And if you live in a flood zone and you're part of the National Flood Zone Program, that's because of NAR. And so brokers see the value of this. And I think overall, if the broker who is contracting with these agents sees the value, then he or she is going to really want to require their agents to be participants in this organization as well.
No, and absolutely. As somebody that is a member, I think it's invaluable. I actually think that it's a shame to me that the National Association of Realtors has actually taken a bit of the rap in it. Were there mistakes that were made and things that need to be corrected? Absolutely. But I think their wins don't always get celebrated so much. Just recently, we had a major win in Chicago with regards to the mansion tax.
Right.
And they had a lot to do with the money and the marketing spent behind that. And I don't think that that's the attention that they necessarily get.
Nor do they even really want, and not because they don't want to take credit for a win for homeowners, but because they don't want to, for instance, be on bad terms with the mayor, or whatever, right? Because they're trying to do other things that they will align with the mayor. Are you trying to say that I'm
now on bad terms with the mayor?
No. But as a lobbying organization, there are lobbying organizations that are squarely on the left and squarely on the right. NAR has this phrase, which is kind of corny, but they call it the Realtor Party. And the idea is it's a bipartisan party. They work with aldermen, mayors, state senate, governors, federal government.
You can't piss a lot of people off, right? You're not going to get what you want.
And those change over time, and they need to be able to work with that bureaucracy that's all underneath it, no matter who's in charge. So they spend a lot of time working both sides of the aisle.
And it makes perfect sense, right? They're not trying to get anyone upset with them. They're still trying to do their job. But as I mentioned that, it's because I think a lot of people, even within the industry that are members, don't realize that the good work that they're doing and the fights that they're fighting on our behalf, that's a big win for not only our homeowners in our city, but that's a big win for us within the industry as well.
Yeah.
What do you think that this means for the consumer moving forward?
Because there are buyer's agents who have always kind of glossed over this, they'll have to figure out how to talk about it, or they may not be in business.
See ya.
So there may be less agents total. There may not. It's pretty, it all depends on how people adapt to this. I look at coming from the mortgage industry during the housing downturn, loan officers and loan originators had to do a much better job after that of disclosing how they get paid with yield spreads and things like that. And they all sort of adapted to it. So I feel like a lot of real estate agents that didn't do this before will just get better at doing this. But because that is on the table, this conversation, it certainly opens up the door for there to be more negotiation about those percentages, depending on, like I said, the listing agent here in Chicago does more than a listing agent in some other markets. And in those markets, if they're not staging the home and they're not there and they're not taking pictures and they're just putting it on the MLS, maybe those listing agents they don't necessarily think that they should charge as much as they used to because everyone's having the conversations about it now.
Okay, so one of my favorite headlines as of late, and there have been some really good ones, talks about how this lawsuit and the changes that are expected are going to dramatically save consumers a lot of money, i.e. commission structure is gone. Is this something, and I'm going to ask you personally here, with your professional knowledge, do you really think that there is going to be a big change in the amount of money that consumers are paying in commissions?
You're going to find that there's a lot of different business models that might be tested, but a lot of them have been tested in the past. And overall, I think that I don't expect the commission or the amount that they pay, the consumer pays the agent is going to change that much because consumers are drawn to the best agents. They're not drawn to the cheapest agents. And it's, like I said, the biggest transaction that they'll ever go through. And maybe the next one will be even bigger. But for right now, it's a really important deal. And no one goes out and looks for, the cheapest doctor. And it's a very similar situation. So I just don't agree with the sentiment of the press that things are going to change drastically.
Sentiment of the press. That's so eloquently and politely said. Anyways, Todd, I can't thank you enough for being here. This has been amazing. It's so great to have your wealth of knowledge. As I said, you have been a renaissance man in this industry. We appreciate you kind of opening up the closets, talking a little bit more about the National Association of Realtors and bringing your experience with it. Thank you.
Thank you.